Welcome everyone, young and old, again to another Labyrinth episode. And today's topic is the one promised from the most recent topic recorded at least. I don't know if we have that up yet, but I do know that we've had it recorded, and that was on Evocation and Invocation. Today's is a follow-up to that. So if you don't know what Evocation and Invocation is, you'll be fine. I'll go into Evocation just a little bit at the beginning of this. Today's episode is Evocation and Mental Constructs. That's right, Evocation and Mental Constructs. Now, for those of you who may have missed the last episode done on the subject of Evocation and Invocation, it would be wise to go back and listen. For those of you who have not missed it, or who already have a pretty good idea of what these terms are, Evocation is the summoning forth of an entity or being, a god or goddess, a spirit, angel, demon, ghost, good lord, something. Something that has its own will and its own ability to act. Now, that's the normal use of the term. That's the way it's used in day-to-day mysticism. And that is not what we're going to be discussing today. We're going to be discussing a variation of it. The next thing to go into is what are mental constructs. Mental constructs are by their very nature one of the simplest forms of mysticism. This is when you visualize something and to make it real to you and empower it, drive energy into it, and give it form and function. Now with those two statements, evocation and mental constructs being combined in some way, it becomes somewhat obvious that what we're going to be doing here is creating an entity, creating something and giving it a certain level of free will, a certain level of power, a certain level of ability to act on its own. Now, is this merely a psychological tool for messing with our own minds, to direct our own thoughts into a certain way to cause certain effects? Possibly. Is this an energetic method for manipulating the forces of the universe to create new life from nothingness? Possibly. Is it ultimately a fun method of working with energy that has many, many uses? Well, definitely. And that's the reason we're going to be going into it. The how is not often as important as the what. And in this instance, the what is the creation of an entity. The creation of a thing. A being, as it were, that you will be able to give commands. A self-made demon, you could call it. Or a self-made angel. Normally, evocation works off of existing entities. Normally, evocation works off of things that already exist in mythology, in spirituality. Gods, for instance. You may evoke the god of thunder, Thor. You may evoke Michael the angel. You may evoke a random demon from the Necronomicon. Any of these things may be evoked. But in this instance, what we're going to be doing is working with something that does not have its own basis in existing mythologies, may or may not have its own name originally. So the very first thing we have to do is look for inspiration. Look at what we're doing to get an idea of what this creature, entity, or being is going to be. You can draw inspiration from anywhere. But one of the points of drawing inspiration is to gain details as to how it thinks, how it acts, how it makes bargains, how it makes agreements, how it forms pacts, what it will and won't do, what its limits are as an energetic being, what its limits are within what you can force it into doing, ask it into doing, and also what its limits are or are not in causing harm to you or those around you. These things are important. And you can draw this mythology from video games, you can draw it from movies, from role-playing games, books, fantasy settings. Anything that has inspired you can be useful for this. And with that, you can also create your own mythos when you are creating a summoning, an entity per se. Within all of this, options to help empower this include things like details as to what each entity can do. And I say each entity because we're going to deal with multiple summoning of self-constructed entities in a moment. One of the best methods for this is ultimately to take an item that will house this entity. A crystal, a rock, a piece of glass, a bauble, a piece of metal, a key, something. Something that you're going to be able to keep on you and keep safe and is not going to get abused or destroyed over time. And what you're going to do is you're going to focus will and intent on this object as a container for this, as well as imagery and idea. And it's a lot of deep focusing, it's a lot of meditation, it's a lot of mental work to build this binding between these things. And it is a kind of binding. It is a kind of structured linking. What you're doing is you're making it so that this object has power within evocation. You don't necessarily need to use an object. You can use a mental construct only. That is, bring this into being without an object connecting to it. You can use a symbol by making a symbol with a magic square of some form, or by using chaos magic methods, which basically is overlying letters to form a symbol. There are any number of methods. I'll hit on the chaos method one real quick because I know that probably didn't sound as easy to understand as I made it. The chaos magic method, very simply put, you take the name of the entity that you're creating and you give this thing a name. It can be a name that you're inspired to give it. It can be a name that you come up with on your own. Okay? You take the letters in its name. Some people remove consonants, some don't. Some people remove repeated letters, some don't. This is up to you in the length of the name. If this thing is got a name like Tetragramma Abracon, Tetragramma Abracon, that's a heck of a name. You're going to want to do some pinning down of that, some shaving of it, as it were, some reduction, some boiling to that name, because that's going to be a symbol that's very hard to draw. But you take the letters and use the letters as a basis for drawing a symbol by, creative artwork. And it's a method that's so simple that even a caveman could do it, and cavemen probably were doing it. That's one method. The idea is you're making this thing solid and linked. If you don't use an object and you don't use a symbol of some form, even if it's just an inspired symbol that you make up on your own, just a randomly made symbol, if you're not going to use those things, then you're going to want to make sure that you focus on this entity at least once every 2 or 3 days. Maybe write its name down somewhere and remind yourself to meditate and focus on it, to re-empower it. This thing has only got as much strength and power as you give it initially, and it may grow on its own over time to where you don't need to do this at all. But the idea is to be building something that allows you to empower this thing. How much freedom do these things have? I've outlined the basic method, and the basic method takes 5 minutes to explain. It really does. A lot of people are really disillusioned after they read any book on mysticism, because you read 190, 290, 390, 400, 500, 800 pages of text that comes down to, if you focus your mind, you will achieve a result. Well, no shit, Sherlock, that's what got us into mysticism to begin with. We want a round of applause for all of those mystic authors out there who have written reams of information and have been reaming us with that information since the dawn of time. Yes, thank you. Yes. If it wasn't for those mystical authors, if it wasn't for them pouring the crap ton of books of worthless information that ultimately are meant to do just what I've told you to do right here, I wouldn't have a radio show. I wouldn't have anything to talk about, probably. Or at least I wouldn't have as much to get pissed off about. So that said, you build this thing in your mind. You're building this entity. You're creating a mythology for it. You're going through all of that. All that it takes to empower. All that it takes to make it real to you. How much freedom does this thing have? That depends on how much freedom you've given it. You can put down some obvious restraints. Not allowed to kill, not allowed to harm. Which makes for a very limited entity because some harm comes from almost every action. the level of freedom it has is dependent on the constraints of what it was made to do. Let us say that you focus and you visualize an elven archer as a guardian. You want this thing to guard your home, you create a little symbol for it. You put that symbol on a piece of paper, you nail that piece of paper to your door. Or you tape it to your door, you glue it to your door, I don't care. You affix it in some way to your door, you can weld it on there. You get this piece of paper on your door, you've given this some thought, you've visualized it, maybe you've looked at some pictures to give you a clear view of what it should look like, maybe you've done some artwork, maybe you've had others do artwork for you, or you've looked up things that look similar to it, and you've created the picture in your mind, you've given it a name, you've given it a purpose, you know, guard my house, god damn you! That was delayed. See that? That's why you want to make sure that when you do this, you give it enough power to get the job done so it doesn't arrive too late. You know, you do whatever it is you've done to set this thing up, and you have this entity. How much freedom does it have? The first level of freedom it has is to act within the constraints of its assignment. It cannot go outside of that. If you look at it and tell it that it has free will, if you focused on this thing having a free will to act upon its own, you converse with it back and forth, you have conversations with it, you treat it like a living being. You have now given it full free will. That is right, full free will. And what does full free will mean? It means if things go bad, things can blow up in your face. This is why it is wiser to give these things a very specialized goal, but not necessarily. You know, these things are created as an ally to you, which may be the only assignment you give them. You know, this is my demon, this is my angel, this is my elven warrior, whatever you have. You give it a certain assignment as to what it can and cannot do, and it's yours. So therefore it cannot act against your will. That's a restriction of freedom. Even that most basic restriction of freedom to a created entity will save you a ton of hassle in the long run. It will save you months of problems. It'll save you months of difficulties. I cannot express this enough, the importance of really putting some limitations on this. And I know. No one likes limitations. No one likes limitations. And I don't blame you. But in this instance, a little bit of limit can go a long way to preventing problems in the future. How powerful is this? How much power have you given it? Have you given it commands to draw on certain power sources? Have you given it sources of power to work off of? Have you given it symbols to draw from for its power? Does it draw its power from strength and courage for a mile-wide area so that every time someone uses strength or courage, it becomes stronger? Does it draw upon the mention of a word or a name? Does it draw upon an idea? Does it call upon the power of the sun, which shines daily? Does it call upon the moon, which is in the sky, or the stars? Does it call upon the elements? Does it call upon something? Or is it just the energy you're putting into it? This determines the level of power of this entity. And just as you may grow in power by drawing upon all of these almost limitless power sources, so too can it. Be wary of this, that you do not create a monster that you cannot control. But on the other side of that, don't be so weary that you make something that's worthless. Nothing is more useless than a 1-inch elf. Yes, I know there are going to be jokes made about that statement, but it's been proven that a 1-inch elf gets nothing done. So, you know, give this thing a little bit of power, give it a little bit of pizzazz, give it something it can draw on. Things you can assign these things to do. Bindings. Wow, this is a rough one. Giving one of these things the task to bind someone, to restrain someone. This is very effective as far as bindings go. This is a method that, if the creature is one that can bind well, say a squid would be a good binding, a creature that carries chains with it, like ghostly chains of some form. A creature such as a summoned spider type entity, as I can hear some shivers in the background already at the idea. If it's built to bind well, it will bind well. If it's not built to bind well, it will still attempt to bind an entity in the way that the binding has been designed. Remember to be clear with your thoughts and words. Understand your own subconscious and recognize there's a part of you that likes to screw yourself over and try to get there before it does and not do that. Defensive. How good are these things at defense? If I had to pick a task for these things, defensive would be the primary. Building one of these mental constructs, or a small army of them, we'll get to that in a moment, is one of the better methods for providing a level of unparalleled mystical defense. Because these things have been given an assignment. Protect my home, protect me, guard this person, guard that person, do this thing to protect this thing, person, ideal, whatever. Defense is a very simple process. But if you've limited it so that this thing cannot kill, it may restrict itself so that it does not harm. If you've limited it so it does not harm, it may not be able to defend all that well. You may still assign this thing, if it's a wizard-type construct, you know, it's your summoned wizard. It's your summoned demon, your summoned angel, your summoned mystical animal that can move energy on its own. If it's one of these things, one of these types of constructs that you've created, it may still defend with its own barriers and shielding and reflection, but if you've limited it, its options, its ability to defend, just as your own would, will be limited as well. Offense. Offense. What a... It has been questioned if I like offense. And I just have to say that, you know, that is not really a... That is not really a question. I mean, I am not a man who believes in heavy firepower. Less than 5 times per any target. Offense is an excellent method for these things. You want to go to war, having your own personal army is one way to go about it. Much like defense, they are limited by the restraints, the level of energy, the power you've invoked. Yes, tying them to the source of all energy itself is dangerous, but functional. You may wish to inform them to be friendly fire aware, so they don't hit each other or hit other things that you've summoned that are not them. Remember, this is creation. If this thing is coming to your mind from somewhere else, it's not a created thing. If it's coming in to talk to you and it's like, hey, I'm here to give you a hand, don't treat it like a created entity. But if this is something you're creating for this purpose, well, give it a little bit of direction in what it can and can't do, especially in the form of offense. You know, telling it not to kill, but that it can wound up to a certain degree, may be viable. I don't tend to give these things a no-kill mode. No. I am a man who believes that if you have crossed me in such a significant manner that I'm sitting there now casting the arcane arts, that you probably deserve whatever I can make happen to you. That said, you know, I usually tell them the basic, you know, do not harm my friends or family, do not harm innocent bystanders. You have a target, that is what you hit and nothing else. Nothing else takes injury. Avoid collateral damage at all cost. Why? Because these things are constructs that have been given intelligence, and while they learn and they grow, or they can be told to learn and grow, they can be empowered to learn and grow. Remember, it's your focus. You may turn this thing into nothing but a simple robot that shoots, for all intents and purposes, when it's said and done. But if you've given it the ability to think and reason on any level, it will likely make decisions that are not always what you would consider wisest, safest, most morally sound. You can also import your morality into these things. You visualize your morality as a sphere of light and impart it into them. You can give a part of yourself to the constructs. You may form a construct that is you, just another you. These are options. These are options with risks. What about the evocation of an entire army? Sometimes one is not enough. Sometimes a single sword on the battlefield is insufficient to win a war. In such situations, you form an army. You may use individual symbols, or you may use a template. In this, you will want some way of keeping tabs on this army, some physical method. You may use it mentally if you're only summoning forth this army for a moment. You may use it within your mind if you only intend this to last but a moment. But a moment's lastingness is not that effective, and we're talking about something that's going to be given free reign. This is not some simple spellcast manipulation of energy, although that may be its purpose. To use such a powerful tool, it is wiser, far more efficient, when summoning an army, to make use of something that is going to last a long time, even summoning a single invocation. Summoning an entire army is not that difficult. Allow some variation, allow your mind to fill in the details, and view your army before you. Have symbols set up to create them, have objects set up to hold them. If you have an army of 200, have 200 stones that you've counted to hold your army. Place them somewhere that is safe, that receives power. Make it a clean area, Upkeep it. Do the things you need to do to keep these symbols, these storage compartments, these enchanted tools safe while they store your army. If you must do this with just your mind, make a running tally of the numbers. Make a breakdown of the names. If something feels out of place, intuitively feel and let yourself be guided as to which one is injured, which one is harmed. Let yourself receive the information as to what is going on with this. But what about other uses for these things? We've went through the basics of combat and binding. These things may act as helpers. They may act as beneficial aid. They may act as a form of surrogate spellcaster, following people around to do good deeds and do good things. And this is a viable option. This is the Labyrinth, and I know I come from the blasting with force school of wizardry. But that does not mean that that is the only method. It's the only method I use, but that does not mean that is the only method. Not all of this need be used destructively. You may build the construct to do things that you yourself are not that very well versed in, such as healing. You may give it access to universal energies, such as Reiki, such as the wisdom of the universe, such as any number of things. And in this, you may have given it sufficient power, sufficient knowledge to do that which you cannot normally do. Now, the problem, and it is a problem, comes with the upkeep of these things. How do you keep these things running? Well, I've mentioned it kind of. They're going to draw on your energy somewhat. They're going to draw on your reserves, which means if you're not doing continuous meditations daily or weekly to restore your energies, to rekindle the arcane power within you. If you're not doing this, then you are likely burning out, using up more than what you've got. Even if they're tapping other energies, they use some small level of your energy to do what it is that they do, to maintain thought, to maintain form, to maintain function. They use up your mental energies as you remember them, to give them stability. They use up your energetic properties to some degree. And this is why no one tries to upkeep an army indefinitely. At least, not at the beginner levels. Over time, you may gain knowledge and strength to do such. At the same time, you may find yourself sacrificing the army for the power of one when that time comes. You may only use one or two constructs eventually, simply because it is less fatiguing to do so. Lastly, what do you do when one of these things gets out of control? The question of how to deal with one of these things, how to handle it, you've got a rogue entity that you created. In my mind, the simplest method for dealing with this is, of course, to approach the thing in a friendly manner, inform it of your grievances, and and blow it off the face of the earth. Destroy it, wipe it out, break it down until all it is energy, until it has no pattern, and then reabsorb it because it was yours to begin with. Shatter it, break it, strip it. You have control over its power. Reabsorb it. Drain the essence from it and scatter the pattern of it. Scatter the empty shell across the cosmos and let it return to the pattern from which it was formed. There is no reason anything like this should be allowed to operate outside of your will for a long-term period, and it only does so at your own allowance. You have power over these things. If you have created it, you have power over it. If you have manifested it, it is yours. It is only the limitation of the mind that says, I cannot do this because I have made it. It is stronger than me. It does this, it does that, blah, blah, blah. Bullshit excuse after bullshit excuse. All those things are a way of denying that you are the one that created it. You are the one that uses it. That it is your power made manifest, and therefore you can remove it as simply as you created it. That in mind, these things can be tricky too. Given enough power and enough free will, it may seem impossible to strip it. And what this means is it takes more effort. It takes creating a counter symbol, if you created a symbol for it. It takes destroying the object you placed it into. It takes purifying the object you placed it into, purifying your home, purifying your mind, doing meditations to bring you back to center and focus. These are the tools of overcoming such a thing. And, as many other tools are in the Labyrinth, these are also the tools to awaken the night within.